Creating a groove from scratch can be pretty overwhelming if you're not really feeling inspired, especially the whole process of creating an audio track, adding in a kick, creating a MIDI track, adding a hi-hat in, and repeating that over and over. It can feel really annoying. So how do we cut that process down into one single step? That's what I'm going to show you today. Let's dive in. So the first thing we're going to do is in our MIDI track, load up this device called Instant Haus. This is part of the Max For Live Essentials bundle. So if you have Ableton Live 9.5 standard or above, you can grab this for free. I'm going to leave a download link for these below. Now we can see that these tracks are split into kick, snare, hi-hats, and percussion, and it's outputting us a house groove. And if we hit play, you can see that each of these individual tracks start outputting us MIDI, but we don't have anything to be triggered here. So we're gonna have to drop an instrument. Now, if you go into your drums panel over here, you can see that Ableton Live offers you a ton of different drum kits that you can just drag and drop here. If you hit play, but let's say you want to create something of your own, you don't want to rely on these core kits. So what we're going to do is then now load up our own samples, but therefore we need a drum rack. So drum rack, we're going to put it right after Instant Haus, and we can see that the kick corresponds to the note C1. So in our drum rack C1, we're going to load up a kick. I'm going to go into my newly released Yerevan sound pack here and load up a kick that I like. And if we hit play, you see that it's triggering that kick. And now let's do the same for the other patterns here. We can see that the snare, also known as the clap, is being triggered on the note D. So I'm going to go into my claps folder, look for a clap that I like, and drag it onto D1. Nice. Let's do the same for the rest. So the closed hi-hat seems to be playing on F#1. Let's look for a hat. Closed hi-hat. Nice. I like this one. So F#1. The open hi-hat is playing on A#1. Let's look for open hi-hat, put it in A#1. Last but not least, we have the percussion, which is playing on C#7. I don't know why it's set to such a high value by default. Let's drag it down to a value that we see in our first drum rack here. Let's go for G1. So I'm going to look for some percussions, have a ton of those in Yerevan as well. This one's nice, put it on G1. So now if we play, it's gonna trigger every single one of these samples. Okay, it's not triggering the open hi-hat because we're gonna have to set the pattern to 13 and above. You see? And the percussion, we're gonna have to set it to 1. Nice. This already gives us some inspiration, something that we can work with instead of doing that tedious process of And what I really love about this drum box is that it gives you randomization parameters. They just output completely different results that you did not expect. So if we hit randomize the velocity here, it'll randomize us the velocities on each and every single one of these parameters here. You see? For example, the closed hi-hat, the highest velocity amount is now 106. The lowest velocity amount is 86. You can also dial them down here. Nice. You can also see a shift parameter on each and every single one of these panels. This basically shifts the MIDI notes along the grid. If you do that for the percussion and the hi-hat, that's pretty usual because those are usually not perfectly on the grid, not quantized. I would highly recommend that you just play around with these different randomization panels here. For example, the swing, velocity, pattern, shift. Just crazy. It gives you so interesting results. The kick pattern, snare pattern, hi-hat pattern, percussion pattern corresponds to a different MIDI groove. And you can always switch out your samples at any time. And here's where the cool part comes in. Let's say we have our first groove set up. We're happy with how this sounds. So what we're going to do is shift click the Instant Haus rack with the drum rack and hit Command or Control G to group them up. Once they're grouped up, you can click on this little chain selector here. And for this first one, we're going to call it Variation A. I'm going to duplicate this, call this Variation B. So we have two separate channels. Both have Instant Haus and the drum rack loaded. This is A. And this is B. They sound the same currently. For B, we don't want the kick. We don't want two kicks. So we're going to mute the kick out here and start randomizing. just randomize a bit here. See? Nice. You see how it stacks both of those grooves? Might be a bit too much. I don't like the shift, to be honest. I'm going to dial it back down to 0. And what I could do for track B is then load up different samples into my drum rack because we've duplicated it, right? So usually I like switching out the percussions, like here, and maybe replace the clap with also a percussion, replace the hi-hats with percussion sounds. Can give you really interesting results. Mess around with the velocity perhaps a bit here. I usually like lower velocities because those give you a softer groove, a more smooth groove. So this one's too harsh. Let's pick up another one, like this one. Can also crank down the volume here. And mix that in with the original groove. So we can dial this back down a bit here. Isn't that just awesome? So you can repeat this process as many times as you'd like. You can also just duplicate this one over here and call this chain C. And for chain C, you can then perhaps create a break rhythm. So this gives you two different options. One's for house music, so the 4 to the floor type groove. And you can also get like these drum breaks, which is really amazing. Listen to how this sounds. Completely different type of vibe. You can then mute out the kick, play that with the rest. Amazing. And you can add weird sounds. Doesn't need to be perfect, right? You can just come up with a really strange groove. Just have fun along the way. And when I have my groove set up, I usually like to solo the kick. So I'm going to solo layer A, mute out all the other elements, create an audio track, hit resampling, record arm, and then record the kick into a new track. Perfect, that's more than enough. Take the kick, duplicate that to the very end. Gonna go back to the MIDI track and enable all the other layers but the kick. And now we're gonna create a new track. Hit resampling again, so audio track, resampling. And we're going to resample the rest. So everything but the kick. Nice. So now that we've resampled everything, we can basically mute the MIDI track here and work with audio. So we can mix the kick with the original top loop that we've created here. And what I then like to do at this point is add a shaker groove so it becomes more speedy, becomes quicker. And if I'm feeling really up for it, then I could add some kind of an Atmos to give it a bit of a melodic vibe. And you can group all of the tracks besides the kick into, let's say, Sidechain Group. And then you can add a compressor on top of the Sidechain Group. So whenever the kick hits, everything else is being reduced in volume. So Sidechain input from track 2, which is the kick. Dial down the threshold. Vibe. So that's another video for you. If you liked, feel free to hit that like and subscribe button. Grab these sounds on Lotus Tunes. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.